So
Yes.
yeah. Okay, so apart from yourself, is there any other person on the call? Olawale, Olawale, are you good? Or were
Yes,
you
I
able
was able,
to?
yes,
Yeah.
I was able to do it. I was able to do the policy, risk-based policy and the user-based policy. I was able to do the two of them.
Oh, okay. So you're able to set up the SSPR, you're able to set up the conditional access policies, right?
I didn't go that far. I didn't set the SSPR. I've not done that. Just I only just made the user and the risk-based policy. I've not done that one yet.
Oh, okay. Okay, cool. Sorry, who is Emmanuel Obina? Obioma.
Hi, Farouk. Good evening, sorry. I just
Yeah.
joined you.
Oh, okay. I remember. Okay. Yeah, so welcome. Yeah, so like I told you then, we started the session about 4 weeks ago or so, right? And we've had different sections, different tasks, and I'm going to share this thing with you, the 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 course outline that we are using. I'll share it with you. Um, I would also share how you can set up your demo environment. I'll share it with you as well. Right? So you can, and there are videos of the sections that we've actually done. I think we have about 4 videos also. So I'll share the link with you as well so that you can get to see it and you can join us. Okay, so for SSPL now, Lawal, Mr. Lawal, have you been able to set up the SSPL? Even though to me the SSPL is very cheap, there's nothing there. It's when you are trying to integrate it with your on-premise with the Active Directory. That's when you might have one or two challenge, but the one in the cloud is very, very easy. Were you able to do that?
Yeah. Just like we were taught by Mr. Usman Abdullah. So I just
Yeah.
went through the synopsis, the steps he gave us. That is, if you want to do, before we can actually set up SSPR, we have to first set up the MFA by going through the authentication method policy. So I went through that. Having done that, then I came back to SSPR, still under protection, under Entra portal. So I went through it.
Okay, so you were able to set it up. Were you able to test it as well?
I set it up, but I did not exhaustively set it up. Test it. So I set it up. So what I basically did was this. So when I tried it for a particular user, I did MFA for a particular user. Having done that, I also did SSPR. I set up SSPR for the same user. Thereafter, I went to sign in, using the normal portal, and I was prompted to supply more information. In form of Microsoft Authenticator. So that was where I stopped, and it was asking me some more questions. So I definitely know that by being prompted to supply those information, so that's a form of MFA, multi-factor authentication. So I just assumed that it's gone through.
Okay. So maybe later on you can just try to complete it so you'll be sure that everything seems fine. Okay.
Okay. I don't
Yeah.
know. I don't know. Maybe I can share it or if you.
Okay, you can share your screen. Let's see it.
Okay. I'm trying to share it. don't know what's wrong with the network. Mr. Farouk is not responding.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if it is my network down here that's bad.
Okay, cool. So that's not an issue. So okay, cool.
So
So
I'm
we
sorry,
can.
I was able to do that, and I was also able to do the implementing the sign-in risk and user risk policy. So I was able to do that.
Okay, cool.
So I did
No
it.
problem. No problem. I just want to confirm that everybody, like, we are just performing the task. We are always performing the task given to us. So I think we can proceed to the next agenda. Trying to get the next agenda. Cybersecurity. Okay. So we are getting close to the ending of the Entra part. Um, okay, so um, Usman, I think Usman would come in as well from here. I think the next identity protection. I think the next will be web application proxy, passwordless, then the lifecycle workflow. Usman, are you on the call?
Yes, hello, good evening, everyone. Yes, I'm on the call.
Yeah. So you can take it off from here.
Yeah, good evening. Good evening, everyone. Trust you have a great day at work. All right, thank you, Mr. Farouk. So please, I'm trying to get to set up my PC. Yeah. Please, kindly confirm if you can see my screen.
Not yet from my hand.
Hello, please confirm if you can see my screen.
Yes, I can now see it.
All right, thank you.
I cannot see it here.
Okay, I can see the screen now. I can see the screen.
All right, thank you. So please just give me. Hello, yeah, good evening, everyone. Sorry, I was waiting for the network to respond. All right, so I don't know. I'd just like to ask before we go further because we are going deep into the Microsoft's cybersecurity track, right? So, but before we go further, I just want to ask, is there anybody that has been having any private challenges of whatsoever, so that we can maybe use the next 15 to 20 minutes to address that before we can move on, if there's anyone at all? Hello, please feel free to speak so we can all work together and achieve the same goal. Okay. So I guess everybody is fine with what we've done so far. All
Yeah,
right.
that's what I
So
want to say. So since no one is speaking, I guess um everyone is fine. I
so
can see
everybody is fine.
someone, John. I'm far behind because I missed the last two classes, but I'll catch up. I've been coaching lectures on the first and 26 plus 7 writing my first semester exam next week. Okay, no problem, John. Wish you success in your coming exam.
She success in your coming. Just welcome to the Carnifats. It's nice to have you. All right. So okay. So I think what we need to do now is just to move on with the learning part, right? So far we've been able to cover the multi-factor authentication. We've also been able to cover the conditional access policies. I don't know. We have the install and configure Azure AD Connect to sync on-premises Active Directory. I don't know if we've been able to do that. Or is there anybody that has tried to install the AD Connect? Because we might need that AD Connect going forward. So I don't know if there's anyone that's been able to do that. Hello.
Yes. So I have an Hyper-V tenant and I installed the Windows Server. So I installed Windows Server on it and I was trying to download AD Connect in it.
Okay,
But I
have you
don't
been
know.
able to? Okay.
Yeah, I don't know the exact. What exactly are you asking?
Yeah, so I was asking because part of the learning track. So under the Enter ID, so we have the install and configure Azure AD Connect to sync on-premises Active Directory with your Azure AD. So that's why I was asking if there is anyone that has been able to achieve that. If you've been able to install the AD Connect, and if you've been able to use it to sync, if you have an on-premises user, if you've been able to achieve that, that's what I'm asking.
No, I've not been able to achieve it. I've not completed it fully, but I'm still working on it.
All right. Okay. So, you said you already have a virtual machine running, right? And you've installed a Windows Server on it, right? So, what have you been able
Yes.
to do with the Windows Server? Were you able to promote it to a domain controller?
No, I didn't promote the domain controller.
All right. So, okay, no problem. So, but I think you might need to promote that server to a domain controller, because if you don't do that, you might not be able to achieve so many things, right? You know what your domain controller does is, I don't know, maybe I should go deep into that because of others on the call, right? So, but I just think you can just keep going. Then, if you're having any challenges or any blocker, you can always reach out to us. But what you should do is you need to promote that server to a domain controller so that you can properly use that server, right? So So also for your AD Connect, I think you might need to set up another server for it, but you can still install the AD Connect on that domain controller. But I think it's better if you have another server set up for that, right? So depending on your use case, anyone that is fine with you can install the AD Connect on that same server, right? Okay, so maybe I would have loved to show us, but remember I said my system crashed and I just got a new system today, right? So I don't have any, if you look at my download, see there's nothing on my system. If not, I would have loved to show us around the on-premises environment. So probably if I'll be the person taking the next call, by Saturday, I should have set up my environment again. Right, so maybe we would all go through the installation and the lights and the setup. All right, so I think what we just need to do is to just continue with the learning track. So for today, we'll be going to the identity protection, right? And I'm very, very sure that so many of us has done the identity protection without even knowing, right? But I'll just explain about the identity protection and we'll get to understand what I'm talking about, right? So talking about the identity protection, so from the word identity, so we are just trying to protect our identity. And what are your identity? Your identity majorly are your users, right? Your user is your identity. When you talk about your identity and access management, but remember I told us that we have different type of identity. We have our service principals, we have our managed identity, we have our applications. There are some applications that act as an identity, right? So we have several identities, but in this context, we are talking about our users as an identity, right? So talking about the identity, if we go far back to our previous class, I made mention of something. I said we have an on-premises environment, right? And we also have the cloud environment. Remember, I talked about the hybrid, right? I said if you are leveraging on the on-premises and the cloud, you are running an hybrid environment. But if you are only using the cloud, so you are running a full cloud environment, right? So why am I bringing this in? Is because I want us to understand the concept of this identity protection, right? So in the Microsoft space, there's something we call the identity protection. So when you hear AAM, the Azure Active Directory Identity Protection, so it is talking about your identities on the cloud, right? So whenever you hear the identity protection, don't think about, sorry, don't conflict it with the on-premises, right? For the on-premises, I'll come to that. So whenever you hear the identity protection, we are talking about the cloud identities, your users on the cloud, right? Your assets on the cloud. So it's what this identity protection is talking about, right? So you now ask the question that if we are only protecting my identities on the cloud, how about my identities that are sitting on the on-premises? That's on my AD, right? That's on my domain controller. Or if I'm running a federated environment, let's say for example, I have a third-party identity and access management solution. How about those identities? How do I protect them? So that's when you now talk about the on-premises identity. And what handles that is what we call the Microsoft Defender for Identity, right? But if we are talking about the cloud identity, so that's where the identity protection comes in. So now what is this identity protection? This identity protection is just a feature, or should I say, just a solution that Microsoft has developed to help us protect our identities on the cloud. And how did they protect this? So Microsoft, remember I told you Microsoft is a very big community, and if you look at majority of the world, most times you are hearing that Microsoft is attacked, Microsoft is having a vulnerability, Microsoft is doing this, Microsoft is not as secure as you think. So, like I used to say, no, there's no solution or there's no security product that is 100% perfect, right? Everybody has their flaw. That's why everybody used to have a vulnerability. You might have a 0 day. That's why every second Tuesday of the month, there's something we call Patch Tuesday. So what is Patch Tuesday? So every vulnerability that has been discovered in the past few weeks. So there's always a Patch Tuesday. So Patch Tuesday is the day that Microsoft fixes all that vulnerability, right? So you get a patch. That's what I used to see on your device. If you come to your device, if you go to your settings on your device, sorry, let me just take us there because we should be seeing what we are talking about, not just talking. Okay. So if I come to my device, so I just done please. So if I come to my device and I come to my update, right? So if there is any new recent release, you get to see them here, right? So you get to see all your updates. So what this update are just doing is probably there's a patch, right? So the update is there to fix if there's probably a vulnerability or a fault with that particular software, right? So that's what the update does. So going back to what I was, sorry, please. Sorry, please, just a minute. Yeah, so apologies, please. Apologies. I was distracted for it. So, as I was saying, right? So I said Microsoft is a very big organization. Why? Because mostly if you go to your banks, if you go to organizations, if you go to places around you, you see people using a Windows device, be it a desktop, be it a laptop. Almost everybody is running on Windows, right? You hardly see users using their. It's just of recent that the MacBook, that's your Mac OS, now becomes one part. People are now using the Apple devices, right? So, but if you look at majority of the OS, so you see that Windows is the majority of the OS. At least 70% of the world population is using the Windows. So that's why you always notice that the Microsoft always has more vulnerability because you have more threat attackers trying to leverage on those vulnerabilities on Windows, right? So that's why we have what we call the identity protection. So for the identity protection, we'll be talking about two things. One, we'll be talking about our user risk and our sign-in risk. So when I talk about our user risk, so what is the user risk? So just from the name user risk, so we should all know that probably that user is probably that user has been found to be risky, right? Just from the name user and risk. So Microsoft leverages on what we call the leverages on the machine learning. So Microsoft uses machine learning to learn about all users because all Microsoft solution is built on the graph. So there's something we call the Microsoft graph. I might be going too far, right? I might be going too far, but we're all on the same, sorry, we're all on the same learning paths. Someday you are still going to get to hear about the Microsoft graph. Sorry, I entered the wrong, okay. So all Microsoft solution are all built on this particular graph, right? So Microsoft has a machine learning that does a learning on all. Let's say, for example, if you are signing, if your credential is being attacked, and the machine learning takes note of all of this, right? So there's what we call the user risk. So explaining the user risk. So the user risk is just a probability that a user account has been compromised, right? So that's what the user risk means. Just a probability that the account of that user has been compromised. Let's say, for example, the account of that user, the username and the password of that user was found on the dark web, right? You know, Microsoft has threats. They have threat hunters everywhere, right? You have the ones on the dark web that always they'll be acting like they're also an attacker, but they are not an attacker. They are just there to gather intelligence, right? And to report back to Microsoft that okay, this is what is happening in the dark web. This is how we should protect our environment, and this is how we should protect our customers, right? So the user risk is just a probability that that user account has been compromised. Say, for example, Microsoft has seen that username and the password probably somewhere in the dark web. Maybe somebody is selling it for a very cheap amount, right? So that's what the user risk is talking about. Then when we talk about the sign-in risks, remember I said for the identity protection, we are more concerned about two things. That's the user risk and the sign-in risk. So for the sign-in risk, just like the user risk, the user risk is telling us that that there's a probability that the user is compromised, right? So for the sign-in risk, it is just telling us that there's this probability that that sign-in, right, of that user is compromised, or it is not the right user that is signing. Let's say, for example, you are in Lagos this morning now. You signed in from Lagos. When I checked your sign-in logs, as at 9 o'clock in the morning, you are signing in from Lagos. Then by 9:30, you are signing in from, let's for example, you are signing in from US. You know that signing is somehow it is suspicious because you can't travel from Lagos to US in 30 minutes. It is not possible. It is never possible. So that particular sign, even if you have signed in, you have met all the requirements for signing in, you have entered your username and your password, even entered your MFA. So at the same time, that signing is still said to be there's a probability that the signing has been compromised, right? So that is where the identity protection comes in. This is helping you to protect your identities, right? So before now, the identity protection can be gotten in this particular, sorry, sorry. So the identity protection can be gotten from this portal, right? So you come to under your protection, you see identity protection, then you click on identity protection, then you see the dashboard. So under the dashboard, because this is a test environment, so you might just get few report on this environment. So under my dashboard, I can get to see number of attacks blocked, right? So 4 attacks have been blocked in the past 1 month. So that's if you have the identity protection in place, right? So you can get to see the dashboard, number of users protected, just 1 user has been protected in the past 1 month, right? Mean time to remediate high risk user, right? So you can also get to see your number of high risk users. So please, can you just give me a minute, please? Hello, apologies, please. I'm back on the call now. Apologies. So please let me know if you can see my screen. Share my screen. Hello, can anyone hear me?
Yes, we
Hello.
can hear you.
Yeah,
Yeah, we
yeah.
can
So
hear
sorry
you.
about
I can hear you.
the other time. Yeah, I think I'm back online now. Okay, so if you can see my screen, let me continue then. Okay. So for the identity protection, right? So you still have the dashboard here, right? So we can also see the dashboard. So we'll come back to talk better on this dashboard, right? So you can get to see if you are signing from a risky location or if there's a risky signing. So you can get to see where that particular sign is coming from, right? So we'll come back to talk about this. So let me go to the policies itself, right? So when we talk about our user risk, remember I said our user risk is just a probability that a user account has been compromised, right? So, but the recommended before now, this is where we come to create our identity protection policy, right? For the user risk, you come under your assignment, you had your users, right? And if you want to start with a selected user, you come here, you do that, right? So you come here, you select on the risk type level. If it's an high risk, if it's a medium and above level or a low. So I'm just going to rush through this, but I'll talk about this properly when we go to the conditional access. I'm just trying to let us know how this was configured before now, right? So for the controls, when you come to the controls, you can get to see, I just want us to understand something. So for the controls under the user risk, we can get to see that we have block access or allow access. So if you are blocking access, it means if this user's risk is low, you want to block access for that user. You don't want the user to be able to sign in, right? And you can also say, okay, allow access, but require a password change, right? You can see that if I click on allow access, I must select the required password change. I cannot just select the allow access, right? Let's back to block access. So it means that if the risk of the user is low, okay, I want the user to be able to sign in, but the user has to change his or her password first. So what does that mean? Remember that when we talked about our MFA and our SSPR, I said there's something called the combined registration. Before you can perform SSPR, MFA must be in place, right? So if you are being required to change your password, it means for you to be able to change your password, you must have passed MFA. So it means you are the right user trying to sign in. And if you cannot change your password, you will not be allowed to sign in. So that's what this user risk is just talking about. So when we go to the conditional access, we are going to explain this better, right? So, but you can see that here the policy enforcement is set to disabled, right? Because Microsoft has recommended that when you are rolling out your user risk and your sign-in risk policy, that's for your identity protection. You should do that using the conditional access, because conditional access would allow you specify more controls, right? So that is the essence of the conditional access. Normally, you can roll out your MFA using the security default. You can roll out your MFA using the per user MFA, which I showed us on the very last go, right? But using the conditional access makes you'll be able to define that condition the way you want to define it, right? So let's not forget for our user risk, what we have is either to block access or to allow access, but require the user to change their password. So that is for our user risk. So that's the probability that the user is risky. That means the user has been compromised. So going to the sign-in risk, remember I said for our sign-in risk, let's say for example, the user is coming from an unknown location or a malware-linked location. Let's say for example, the user is coming in from Russia or the user is coming in from Ukraine. We all know that Russia and Ukraine are well known for threat actors, right? Most of these threat actors are always coming from Russia, from Ukraine, right? So what do you want to do if a user is coming in from those locations? Do you want to block them or do you want to allow them to come in, right? So that's for unknown location. We also have suspicious browser. Say for example, a user is using the Tor browser or a Brave browser, and you don't want that user to come into the environment using a Tor browser or a Brave browser. So this is where the sign-in risk comes in, right? You are coming in from a risky browser, which is a Tor browser, or you are coming in from a risky operating system, which is your Linux devices, right? I don't want the user to be able to come in, block that access or allow the access, right? So that's what the sign-in risk does, right? So for the sign-in risk, the same thing happens. You can select all users or you can select some individual users, right? Also, you select the risk level, either high, medium, or low, right? So what do you want for this? If you notice, when we talked about the user risk, we have block access, right? We also have the block access for the sign-in risk. But now, if you want to allow access, because it's just a sign-in risk, so it is just the sign-in that is risky. So what do you want? Asking users to change their password might seem frustrating because it is not the user's credential that is compromised. It is just that sign-in you are not so sure of, right? So that is why what comes in, we have the required multi-factor authentication. We can also see that we have two different things, right? So that's just the difference between the sign-in risk and the user risk, right? So if we look at the enforcement, we can also see that it is disabled because Microsoft has recommended that we use conditional access, right? So we also have what we call the multi-factor authentication registration policy. So what does this do, right? So let's say when you set this up, we've talked about enforcing MFA, but since you are enforcing MFA using conditional access, you really don't need this anymore. You can either enforce MFA using conditional access, or you can enforce MFA from your authentication methods, right? So there's a place where you can enforce MFA there. But before now, we used to come here to ask users to register for MFA before they can do it. Because if you don't register for MFA, let's imagine now you don't register for MFA and your user is risking. If you are trying to change your password, you'll not be able to change that password because you don't have MFA in place, right? So that is what this registration policy was made for. So it is going to require the user to register for MFA, right? So that's just what we need to know about our identity protection. We know that our identity protection is protecting our risky user sign-in and also our sign-in risk, right? So just the two things. Whenever you hear about the Azure AD identity protection or the Entra ID, remember the Azure AD is also the same thing as the Entra ID, right? So whenever you hear about the identity protection, two things should come in mind. Number one is the user risk, and number two is the sign-in risk, right? So that's that. So now we'll now go to the conditional access where Microsoft has recommended that we set up these policies. If you look at my screen at the top, we recommend migrating user risk policy to conditional access, right? So we'll now go to the conditional access to create these policies. Sorry, my network is a bit slow. Hello. Sorry, my network was acting up. So I think I have two of these policies here. Let me put them down because of network.
Hello, Mr. Abdullah.
Hello, sir.
I'm sorry for cutting in. Can I just ask this question? Please, you were saying that in setting up of MFA, we can use diverse routes to accomplish that. We can use authentication method. We can use MFA under conditional access policy, and we can as well use per MFA. So which one is the best? Which is the best route to set up MFA?
To set up MFA, so the best route to set up MFA, as recommended by Microsoft, is to use the conditional access. Right. Good evening, sir. Another voice looks familiar, but good evening, sir. So the best route is to use the conditional access because with the conditional access, you have lots of options you can select from, right? You can target it to a certain resources, or you can use it certain condition. But if you are using the, let me go to the per user MFA so we can see what I'm talking about. Sorry, let me just. Still connect. Okay. So if I come to the per user MFA, okay, so this is the per user MFA, right? So because I have conditional access in place, right? So from my identity, I come to overview. I've explained this before. So let me just open this. This thing is disturbing my screen. Okay. So before now, if you have a fresh tenant, right? Once you come to overview on your properties, right? So for every tenant, Microsoft has what we call the security default, right? This is the security default. So the security default is what enforces MFA for everyone, both your admins and your normal, your regular user, right? So, but if you have MFA, if you have conditional access in place, or if you are looking at using conditional access, so you come to this security default and you turn it off, right? So because I have security default turned off, right? So, so please just bear with me. I'm trying to take this. I don't know why it's not moving. Seriously disturbing. Okay. All right, so this is the per user MFA, right? So for the per user MFA, what happens is I just come to this per user MFA. If I want to enable MFA for this particular user, I just click on this and I enable the MFA, right? So for this MFA, whatever the person is, even if the person is coming in from a corporate environment, the user will be enforced to do MFA. Even if the user is coming in from a compliant device, the user will be enforced to do MFA. Let's say, for example, the user is signed into this browser. Immediately, the user closes the browser and tries to open that browser again. The user will be asked to perform MFA again, right? But with the conditional access policy, you can say, okay, for this particular user, I want the sign-in frequency to be maybe every 3 days. It means every 3 days, the user is asked to perform MFA again. Or every day. For this one, you have every time. Every time the user signs in, I want the user to perform MFA, right? So with the conditional access, you can create different controls. You can say, okay, for every of the user session, I want the user to have a persistent browser session, or I don't want the user session to be persistent. It means once the user is closing the browser, is the user is signing again, the session of that browser leaves, right? Or I want a continuous access evaluation, mean that what? I'm signed in on this portal now, right? Immediately I leave this tab and I come here to do something else, right? So that this continuous access evaluation, if it is set to 30 minutes, immediately I come to this Microsoft graph, the timer starts. After 30 minutes, this particular session times out. If I come here, maybe after 30 minutes, maybe 32 minutes time, and I come to this particular tab, I'll get to see that I'm being asked to perform MFA again, right? So that's the good thing about your conditional access. You can set any type of control you want for your users, right? I don't know if that answers your question, sir.
Thank you so very much. Thank you so very much. Adequately answered.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much. So that's just the difference between this and using the conditional access. Because for this, you just enforce MFA, right? So, but for this one, you can control the way you want the MFA to be, right? Okay. So we're talking about the identity protection, and I said the identity protection helps us to protect our cloud identity, right? So, and I talked about the user risk. So I said the user risk is just a probability that a user account is compromised. Let's say, for example, the user name and the user password is on a dark web somewhere, or that particular user has been involved in maybe a phishing attack or so, right? So the machine learning learns that and detect that for us, right? So what do we do is, before now, if you go to your identity protection tab, you get to see the users and you just select the level of risk, right? But coming to your container access, if I name, let's name this, I already have it created, so but I'll just talk through it. So let's name this the user risk policy, right? So remember I said I prefer creating separate policies for separate conditions, right? I don't like to bring in the user risk and the signing risk together. At the end of the day, it is not going to do what it's meant to do. So now we have a user risk policy. I have targeted this to a specific user, right? You can see I have one group selected, which is testing. So that's one good thing about conditional access again. You can target it to a specific user or you can target it to all your users, right? So if you target to all your users, if you are a global admin, it is going to tell you not to lock yourself, right? You can say I understand and ignore that. But if you move it to on, that leaves, right? So let's target it to all of our users, right? So one good thing about the conditional access, you are able to target what particular resources you are looking at, right? If I select all cloud apps, so this targets all of my cloud applications. If there's a new cloud application tomorrow, as long as it is added to this thing, so it is going to target that new cloud applications. So that's one good thing about using the all cloud apps, right? If I target all cloud apps, if I'm trying to sign into this Microsoft Graph, if I want to make use of this Microsoft Graph, let's say, for example, I'm trying to use the Graph Explorer. Let's just see something, for example, now. Network is a bit bad today. Okay. Let's do for me. So if I run this get query, right, let's see what happens. So let's see what happens now. You see, you are currently using a sample account, sign in to access your own data. So you just use a sample account to fetch in this data. The sample account is using is Megan, right? But once I have container access targeted to all resources, if I'm trying to sign in, this is signing. So if I come here to sign in, it is going to ask me to perform MFA. So that's one good thing about using or targeting all your resources. But if you are looking at excluding any resources, you can target all, then you exclude that particular resources you are looking at, right? And also another thing you can do is you can start with selected resources. Then you just come to select and you pick those resources, right? So that's one good thing about using the container access. Okay, so now that's that about our target resources. We know our target resource is used to target that particular resources we are looking at, be it a cloud apps, or be it you're looking at authentication contest or your user actions. But let's leave these two for now. Probably we might come back to this so I can explain this properly. I don't want to. Okay, so now, because we are looking at the user, I'm coming. Let me go back to none. So this error can leave. Okay. Because I already have the policy set up. That's why we are getting this, all this error. Okay, so now let's go to our conditions. So because we are looking at our user risk, right? So I'll come to my user risk. I'll click on this. Normally what I should see here is a zero select. So if I click on this one included, so I can see configure the user risk level. So I have the high risk, I have the medium risk, and I also have the low risk, right? So what this means is if I select the high risk, it is only when the risk of that user is high. That is the only time that this particular policy is going to kick. Meaning if the user risk is low, nothing happens, right? If the user risk is at the medium, nothing happens. But immediately the user risk is high, what happens? This particular policy, what I've selected here, I said require multi-factor authentication, right? Require multi-factor authentication, and the sign-in is what? Every time. But this is not correct. This is not correct. Though I didn't create this policy, but this is not correct. So what should happen is for your user risk, right? you should be required to change your password, because what it means is probably the password of that user has been seen somewhere in the dark web or has been seen somewhere on the internet. So that is why the risk, the user risk is high. So it should not be have been signing. Please, if you are following me, please ignore, disregard this sign-in frequency and this control. So the right thing should have been require password change, right? So come in. Let me create a new policy. So let me select all my users and let me just take, okay. So for target resources, I'm taking all my resources. Okay, so now you can see that the network is there. So the conditions, but we're talking about the conditions, right? So when I select this, I select configure yes. So it brings it's opens this up for me. So if I select I, so it only means if the risk level is high, that is when this policy should come in, right? But the recommended by Microsoft is for us to select medium. But like I used to say, it is good when you are starting out, you always start with something that will not affect your users' productivity, right? So you can start with I, you look at your sign-in logs, you determine if you want to set it to medium or if you want to bring it to low, right? But it's always good to start with I. But Microsoft recommends that we start with medium, right? So, but for this policy, I'll be going with I. So if I select medium, what medium means is if the user risk is medium, the policy should come in. And if the user risk is also high, the policy should come in. But if it is low, it should not come in, right? So that's what this means. Even if I decide not to select this, and I've only selected this medium, right? So for this, I'll be taking medium and high. So I'll do okay. So also what you can do again is you can come here, you can select the device platform you are looking at. Let's say, for example, if the user is coming in from an Android device, or if the user is coming in from an iOS device, but me, I prefer to just leave everything as not configured. So if I leave them as not configured, Microsoft is going to take all these conditions, it's going to assess them, right? But if I come here and I say, okay, I just want my Windows devices. So it means if a user is signing in on the Windows device and the user risk is high, this policy should come in. But if the user is coming in from an iOS device and the user risk is high, this policy will not kick in, right? So that's why I either leave this as not configured or I select any device. So any device, it works for all of the devices that are here, right? So most times when you are creating your policies, always use the what if tools, right? After creating a policy, use the what if to validate that the policy is well created. So now we are still talking about our user risk. So for controls now, what do I do? So because it is a user risk, right? I can decide to say, okay, I want to block anybody that is having an high risk. So before the user can come in, the risk of that user must return to low or medium. So I want to block anybody coming in from a high risk environment. Or I can say, okay, I don't want to block. What I just want to do is I want to ask the user to change his or her password, right? So immediately I select this, so it is going to ask me to take either this or this, right? So, but because I don't have any authentication strength, so I'll just go with my require MFA. So I come here, I select my require password change, right? So when I select my require password change, you can see every other thing will be graded out. So I click on select, I come to my control selected. So why am I doing this control selected? So if I come here, you can see every other thing has been graded. The only thing that is available for me is sign-in frequency and every time. So what it means that every time a user is coming in, right? Every time a user is coming in, as long as that user is set or has been detected to be risky, the user has to do what? Has to be the user has to be challenged to change his or her password, right? So the user has to be challenged to change his or her password. So if the user is able to change his password, the user is able to come into the environment. But if the user cannot change the password, it means it is not the right user. And even if for some reasons you can't do your MFA and you are the right person, What you just need to do in this situation, in this scenario or situation, is to reach out to your admin and talk to them. Hello, sir. I'm the right person. I'm trying to come in, but I'm being asked to do this. Can you please help me? Right. So the admin can now decide to give you a temporary access pass, or can now decide to do one or two things so you can be able to come in. So that's what the user risk is all about, right? So the control we are looking at for user risk is just change your password and you're free to come in. I would have loved to demo this for us, but I don't have a demo environment right now. I would have loved to demo this for us. So I don't know if there's any question before I move on to the sign-in risk. Is there any question before I move on to the sign-in risk? Okay, so I think if there's any question, you can always drop your question on the chat, right? So that's for the user risk policy. And remember, the user risk policy is used to detect if a user's credential has been compromised, right? And the Microsoft recommended way is for us to require that user to change their password, right? So that's why whenever you are setting up the user risk policy, always ensure that the risk level is set to high or the risk level is set to medium. Because if you set the risk level to low, it means anytime there is a little, maybe there's a false positive, right? And the user risk is set to low. What happens is for each signing the user is trying to do, the user will be asked to change their password. And it will be very, very frustrating when you're always asked to change your password at every point in time. So let's always ensure that you can start with medium, you check your sign-in logs, you get feedback from your users. If they are complaining too much, you take it to high, or you can decide to leave it at medium, depending on what works best for you. So that's that about the user risk. So now let's talk about our sign-in risk. So for the sign-in risk policy, like I said, I like to have a separate policy for both my user risk and my sign-in risk. So what happens? The user risk policy evaluates for a user risk, right? Why the sign-in risk evaluates for the sign-in? Just like I said, for the sign-in risk, we require MFA and you're fine to go. But for the user risk, we require changing of password. So imagine we are now adding both policies together. So it means that for every sign-in risk, the user has to change their password, which will be very, very frustrating because most times our sign-in might be set to be risky. So imagine for every risky sign-in, you are being told to change your password. So that's why it's always good sometimes you have different policies defined for your conditions, right? So for our users, we know how to scope this. We either scope it to all or we scope it to selected users. And don't forget to always exclude your break glass account, right? Don't forget to always exclude that. So we target our resources, we target all our cloud resources, right? So what we are more concerned about is our conditions. So we are not talking about our user risk now. We are looking at our sign-in risk. Sorry, please. So for your sign-in risk, you select configure. So when you select the configure, so we have high, we have medium, we have low, and we have the no risk, right? So just like the user risk as well. So for the sign-in, I would prefer to go with the medium. So it means if my sign-in is medium, I should be asked to perform MFA, right? And you might say, okay, for your environment, you are a very, very sensitive environment. You want it to be low. For every low risk, you want the user to perform MFA. So it's just the user performing MFA again to confirm that he or she is the right person. Right? So depending on your use case, just come here, you select it, and you click on done. So because this is our user risk, right? Just say, for example, a user is signing in from an unknown location, or a suspicious browser, or the user is signing in from, and there's, we used to call it impossible travel. Maybe you're signing in from Lagos now, and the next 10 minutes you're signing in from Ibadan, or you're signing in from Kwara, right? So I don't expect you to disappear and appear in Ibadan in the next 10 minutes, right? So what we just need to do is, because it's just is the signing that is risky. So for the grant, you can decide to block the access, but since it's just a sign-in, so you can decide to grant, then use the multi-factor authentication, right? So you select. So because of I'm using the multi-factor authentication, I can see that every other thing was not great. They were all left for me in case I want to use them, right? And also if I come to my session, I'll get to see that everything is also available for me to select from, right? But what I'm more interested in here is sign-in frequency. So I'll come to, for my sign-in frequency, I also use every time. So what this means is, say for example, you have a conditional access policy that grants MFA. Maybe after every 7 days, you are asked to perform MFA again, right? So after every 7 days, you're asked to perform MFA. So once you are signed in, you do MFA today, it means for the next 6 days, you'll not be asked for MFA, right? But immediately your sign-in is risky. What happens is you'll be signed out of that session and you'll be asked to perform MFA again because this has been set to every time. I don't know if we understand that. Hello.
We are on track with you.
All right. Okay. Thank you very much. So let's say, for example, you have a conditional access in place before, right? So because this sign-in risk is set to every time, so every time you are signing in, the machine learning keeps learning that pattern. It keeps learning the user, right? So it evaluates all the conditions to ensure that that user session is not risky. So immediately it notices that that session is risky, you'll be asked to perform MFA again, right? So that's where this every time comes in. So that's why it is recommended that when you are setting up your conditional access policy, it's better you don't set it to every time. So you can now target your sign-in risk policy to every time. I would have, but there's a simpler way to test out this, right? So what you should do is, in your demo environment, create a conditional access policy that asks your user to sign in, right? Now create your sign-in risk policy, right? And set it to every time. Now try to use a Tor browser. So once you sign in with a Tor browser, close the session, start another Tor session. You know, when you start another Tor session, what happens? Your IP address will change, right? Tor can give you maybe Germany. The next time you're signing again, it's giving you Denmark. The next time you're signing, it's giving you Netherlands, right? You know, your IP address keeps changing, right? And see what happens with the signing risk policy and the user risk policy. So that's just a good scenario of testing out these policies, right? So we can try that and you can always get back to us, right? So and see how it works. So that's just what this user risk and the sign risk policy is all about, right? So we can also see that before now, Mr. Farouk has told us to create a user risk and a sign risk policy. But this is just the explanation of how these particular policies work. So we all understand that our user risk and our sign-in risk is what is covered by the identity protection, because this is talking to the cloud, right? So our identity protection speaks to our cloud users, but our Microsoft Defender for Identity speaks to the on-premises user, right? So when we get to our Defender, that's our XDR, we get to understand about the Microsoft Defender for Identity. So I don't know if there's any question before I proceed. Okay. So if there's no question, I think I might need to continue from there. Okay, so the next thing is supposed to be the web application proxy. So for this web application proxy, so maybe I might just talk about it, but because I don't have the environment to demo it, and I don't just want us to just talk and talk and talk without achieving anything. Because for this web application proxy, so okay, let me just explain what the web application proxy is all about. Okay. Networks. Okay, so what the web application proxy is all about is, I don't know, for some of us, we might have, I think we call it an intranet, right? So we might have web applications, right, that we use in our organization. Some organizations have some web application that you can only access them when you are inside the company. Immediately you step out of the company, you will not be able to access those applications again. I don't know if we are all familiar with that. Hello? Hello?
Hi. Hi.
Yeah, so I was saying, I don't know if any one of us is familiar with that. You can only access those you can only access those websites when you are inside the company. Immediately you step out, you can't access them again, even if you have the URL to that particular website. The only time you can access it is if you are inside the corporate network. I don't know if we are familiar with that before I continue.
Yes, I'm familiar with it.
Sorry?
Yes, I'm familiar. Like
All right, okay.
it's like this banking app we call FinCo,
Yeah,
with first
Finaco.
the first bank use.
Yeah. Most of those your banking applications, right? And some of your is it your SAP applications, right? So you can only use them
Yes,
when
it's
you are
a SAP.
inside. Yeah, SAP, exactly. So when you are inside the corporate network, right? So what is this web application proxy? From the name web application and proxy, right? So most of us all know what a VPN is, right? So we know what we use VPNs to do, right? So, but this web application proxy is just a solution by Microsoft because of the kind of world we live in now, right? Most of us are working hybrid. Most of us are working in a remote manner, right? So because of this kind of landscape, right? So we might be expected to carry out some tasks. Let's imagine now, I'm not in Lagos and I need to do some kind of things. Do I have to start traveling back to Lagos before I can be able to access these applications, right? So Microsoft now came up with this solution called the Web Application Proxy that allows you to connect to this web application even if you are anywhere on any device, right? So let's say, for example, you want to connect to the web application, even if you are not in Nigeria or if you are not using your company laptop, right? You can easily connect to this application using the web application proxy. So what this web application proxy helps us to do is it gives us we call it uh, so it works like a proxy, yeah, right? It works like a proxy. So it will be sitting between your application and the internet, right? So there is no outbound connection. The only thing that is okay, sorry, there's no inbound connection from the internet. So you're only getting an outbound connection. So if you are connecting to that web application, you're not you're not exposing the application to the internet, right? So and also because this web application has been set up for your environment, it does not mean that everybody can have access to it. It is only those people that has been scoped to the application will be able to access that application, right? And that thing is with your web application proxy. Let's say, for example, if you have a web application that does not support multi-factor authentication, that's the modern authentication. If it only supports the legacy authentication, which is just your username and your password, with the web application proxy, you can easily integrate MFA into this web application, right? So for us to get started with it, before now, on the left-hand side, you get to see the web application proxy here, right? But now, Microsoft has rolled out a solution called the Global Secure Access. So this Global Secure Access is the Microsoft SASE solution, right? So from here, you just come to your Global Secure Access, you click on Activate. So when you click on Activate, it onboards your tenants. It onboards your tenants, right? So for you to do this, you might be required to have little knowledge of your enterprise applications.
Okay,
So
sorry,
it's
Usman.
yes.
Yeah, well done. I just want to confirm. Are we all good? Are we following? Are we all good? Is there anyone with any um? Okay, I can see from John. Okay, so I assume we're all good. And if at okay, I assume we're all good. So you can continue.
Yeah, all right. Thank you very much. Okay, so we can see that I've activated my tenants for the web. Okay, right. So I've activated these tenants for the web application proxy, right? So what I need to just do is to click on the get started. So once I click on my get started, to what we do, madam. Yeah, watch your video. So please just anyway wants me to watch the video. So just hold on, please. Not those. Okay. Okay. All right. So this is the web. This is the web application proxy. So you remember I said Microsoft and changing of their names, just the way they change from Azure Active Directory to the Entra ID, right? So the same thing with this web application proxy. So they renamed it to the private network connectors, right? So for this, you have to come to this portal. So after you must have activated your tenants for this from the connect section. So you now come to connectors, you click on connectors, you get to see download connector service, right? And you get to see configure an application. So the first thing you need to do is you click on download connector service. So what happens is it asks you to accept the terms and conditions, but you can see the system requirements. It's saying Windows Server 2012 R2 or later. That's your Windows Server 2012, 2016. It supports your 2022, your 2019, and also the 2025 server, right? So what you just need to do is you download this connector. Once you accept terms and conditions, the connection should start downloading, right? So once you download the connector, you go on your server, right? Probably the server where you have that web application installed, or it might be your domain controller, as long as that server has access to that your domain controller, right? So you go there, you install this particular sensor, right? So, and again, it is also recommended that you download two sensors. You install one on the server and you install the other on another server. That's for your latency. So that if users are, or if there is a lot of traffic on one of the connector service, it can there can be a load balancing, right? So it goes on the other connector service, right? So once you download It's just so I don't have an on-premise environment now. If not, we would have just gone through all of this. But we should just understand that what you need to do is you download the connector service, you install that connector service on those servers, right? So once you install them on the servers, then you come to configure an app. So I don't know if we've all learned about our application registration. So you can just go and read about app registration on Entra. So remember I told you that Microsoft Entra is not just about your identity and access management, right? So you can do so many other things on Microsoft Entra. We have what we call the application registration, right? You can register your application on Entra, and you can use Entra. You can leverage on the SSO on Entra to connect to those applications, right? So because I don't have a private connector, it's asking me to download one. So what I can easily do is, for the learning purpose, I'll just come to enterprise application. So once I come to my enterprise application, right, so I'm going to see all the applications that I already have, right? You get to see your Google Workspace, you see your Cisco WebEx, you see your Salesforce and the likes, right? But what you just need to do is you come to new application, you create a new enterprise application, right? So when I come to create a new enterprise, so I will get to see if I want to integrate SSO to maybe your Amazon Web Services, your Oracle, your SAP, so you can come to there, but I don't need them. So what I need now is an on-premises application. Remember that it is an application that I only connect to inside my organization. Once I leave my organization, I can't connect to it. So it means it's an on-premises application, right? So I just come here, I click on add an on-premises application. So it takes me here to the basic. So what? It's still asking me to download my connector. Okay, so let me
Okay,
use the
so
app registration. Okay.
yeah, so Usman, for that connector,
Okay.
right? Um, for that connector, I dropped the tags on the chat box, right?
Okay.
Because I was thinking we might kind of avoid that part, but there's no way we'd avoid it because we will still need it in the other section. So, and the complementary task is for the team to deploy a virtual machine, a Windows Server virtual machine in Azure, right? So that they can integrate it with, even though we might do it together. So we'll deploy a virtual machine in Azure. We would integrate it with ADDS, Active Directory Service in Azure, right? So once we have that, then people can now use it to install, they can use it as their connector. Then we install their connectors on it, and they can set up any application they want to set up through it. So I like the fact that you're explaining it to them. So for them to have the hands-on, the complementary task that is here, I want us to all look at the task as well after the call, so that we'll be able to understand this part that Usman is actually explaining. And this part is actually very important. Very, very important. So Usman.
All right. Thank you, boss. Okay. All right. Thank you. So I think do we skip that to, or should I still, because there's no way I'm going to explain this without. So what we should do is maybe just like my boss has said, right? So we should. So, and if you don't have, he said deploy a Windows Server virtual machine on Azure, right? If we don't have access to the Azure environment, so another good thing you can do is we can go online, you can search for your VirtualBox. So we have virtualization environment, right? But me, I prefer the VirtualBox, right? So you can download the Oracle VirtualBox. You can go on YouTube. Just go on YouTube. YouTube should be your best friend. Go on YouTube because this is a new laptop. If not, you'd have seen a lot of YouTube tabs on my device. So go on YouTube, just search for how to set up an on-premises VM, right? So go on YouTube, ask of how to set up your VirtualBox. Okay, let me just minimize. So download your VirtualBox. So once you download your VirtualBox, you can install whatever you want to install on that VirtualBox, be it a Windows operating system, be it your Ubuntu, which is a Linux, be it your Red Hat, right? You can install whatever you want to install on that Linux board, on this virtual machine. So you can even download your Windows Server. So once you have the Oracle VirtualBox downloaded, just come and say download Windows Server, right? You can download any of the Windows Server, either 2022 or 2019, but I would prefer you download the latest. Probably you can download 2022 or 2025, right? So if you come to download Windows Server, so it takes you to the Microsoft page where you can download the Windows Server, right? But the Windows Server is always very large. I think about 5 gig. So probably once you want to download it, just ensure you have enough data before you can download. So you come to download the Windows Server, right? So this is the Windows Server. So once you click on the 64-bit, if it's a 64-bit server you are looking at, so download it. Once you download it, go on your VirtualBox, install it on your VirtualBox, right? And try to set it up. If you don't have to know how to set it up, right? What you just need to do is go on YouTube, type how to set up the server on VirtualBox. Everything you need is on YouTube. Nobody is an island. We all go on YouTube. We all go on Google to learn things, right? This is it. You're going to see a lot of videos on how to set this up, right? Try to set it up, right? Once you are done with that, you can now come how to promote a Windows server to a domain controller. Because what domain controller means is that particular server now has access to manage anything that you want to integrate into that particular server, be it your devices, be it your users, right? You can see how to promote a Windows server to a domain controller. You can get to see them. So these are your tasks, right? Because if you are looking at the Microsoft cybersecurity track, though Microsoft is looking at moving fully to the cloud, but I'm not sure that would happen in the next 10 years. It is not possible, right? So people will still be on their own premises. So try to learn about your own premises. Your AD, this domain controller, your AD is your own premises environment. Try to work around it. So once you are done with this, if you are able to promote this to a domain controller, create a user. Maybe let me write out the tags so that we can all follow. Use my chats. Windows Server, right? Create a user, right? We download a Windows OS as well. So now the user you created on this server, make use of that user to sign into the OS, right? So this is how you learn, right? So then download your Entra Connect server. So use that Entra Connect server to sync this user to your demo environment, right? Use that Entra Connect server to sync this user to your demo. It might look hard, right? But I'm very sure when you start browsing online, when you start going on Google, you start using YouTube, everything becomes easier, right? So just use that to get started. I know between now and Saturday, it is possible for us, right? And I also do my own. I also set up my own environment as well. So maybe probably by Saturday we'll all get to connect and okay. I think someone has a question.
Hello, Mr. Abdullahi. So you were making
Yes,
a
Mr.
statement.
Alva.
I didn't get that.
Right.
You said use Entra Connect to sync what?
Okay, so your Entra Connect. Okay. Sorry. So your Entra Connect is what syncs your identities from your own premises, which is your Windows server, right? Your AD. So the Entra Connect is what helps you to sync from your AD to the cloud and what helps you to also sync from the cloud to the on-premises. So let's say, for example, if you have a policy on the on-premises, the AD Connect is what helps you to take that policy to the cloud, right? So the Entra Connect is what we're talking about. I don't know if that's the question
Okay?
you asked
Is that
me.
okay, Mr. Lawal? if you remember,
That's okay. I got it.
yeah.
I
So
got it.
if okay, cool. Okay, cool. So we are good.
So I think we can
I
start.
understand. Yeah, I understand. It's now getting a little bit complicated now. Right. Are we
So I
still
think if we
enjoying it?
can,
Yeah, are we still enjoying it? Okay, so I need to hear people's voice. TGP, that's Tejiri. Are you still enjoying it? Are you flowing? I don't think she's on the call. Emmanuel Obina, are you following? Hello, Emmanuel Obina. Man, it's as if we've been wasting our
Yeah,
time on the
no, I'm
call.
with you. I'm with you, please.
Oh, okay. Oh, okay. Sorry, Emmanuel, you are the new person. Sorry. Um,
Yes.
John, 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 John Abrak, are you following?
Yeah, I'm following. I'm following.
Oh, okay, cool. I'm sure Lawal is following because he's been asking questions. David Ebulo. Sorry, are you following as well?
Yes, yes,
Oh,
I'm
okay.
here. I'm here.
Okay.
Following.
John Adegbite. Fumi, are you following as well?
Yes, I am. Good evening.
Okay, then Anifat, our runaway mama. Okay, yeah. Okay,
Good evening,
so
both.
okay, so um Lawa,
Okay, I'm so sorry for cutting in at interval. So, is it possible you just help us outline the questions, the task we are supposed to do? It's as if the way Mr. Osman, I'm directing the question to you. I'm so sorry. The way you just hastily mentioned them.
okay,
Maybe
so
maybe later you can just help us outline them. Maybe later.
yeah.
When you're done.
So we are going to outline it on the group chat, right? So let me explain it again, right? So initially I was looking for a way probably we can get to maybe avoid the fact that we might need to create a server, right, to test some of all these things. I was looking for a way to avoid it, but uh, the main thing is that we cannot avoid it, right? So now, because when we are going deeper and deeper and deeper, we still eventually need those servers, and probably yeah, we need the servers, Windows servers, Linux servers, um, even different operating system, right? So now, the task Usman gave us is that we should set up number one, right? Even though we will still outline it, you need a server, right? And for you to be able to get the server environment, there are two different ways. We have the cloud version and we have the on-prem. I mean, we have the cloud and we have the on-prem, right? So for the cloud, you can get to virtualize it from any cloud platform, maybe from from Azure, or maybe any other cloud platform that you can get virtual machine from, right? But before you can be able to set it up in Azure, that means you must subscribe for maybe the free trial Azure. You can set up $200 Azure credits, right? Whereby you can use it to do one or two things in Azure. That's for the cloud. Right, for the on-prem, right? That's what Usman was trying to explain, that you can use what is called a virtual box, right? Whereby you can go online, search for VirtualBox, you download the agent. Once you download the agent, you install it, right? Once you install the agent, then you now create the image for the Windows server. And before you can be able to create the image, you will need to download the image, that's the ISO file from Microsoft official portal, right? So you can just search online, download um, Windows Server 20. This is 2025, right? So you can download. I don't know if if the latest is 2025 or 2024 or 2023. So just download the latest version of the Windows Server, download the ISO version of it, and install it on the use it to set up the Windows Server from the VirtualBox, right? So once you have that, that means you have a server already. So now the next thing will now be for you to now create your, the next thing will be for you to promote it to a domain controller, right? So now let me explain what that domain controller is. So you have your Active Directory in the cloud. That's what you are currently utilizing, which is the Entra ID. The way you are able to create your users, right? You're able to create your users, create your groups, and many more, right? So now, and if you remember, during our second call, right, our second session, I mentioned something that there are different types of environment. We have the cloud-based environment, we have the on-premise environment, and we have the hybrid environment, right? So now, for the on-premise, for the cloud, you're able to create your users in the cloud. So those users are being managed from the cloud platform, cloud Active Directory, which is called Azure Active Directory, which we all know as Entra ID. What about the on-premise environment? How do we create our users, right? How do we manage our users, our groups, and many more, right? So all those things are actually being done directly from the on-premise AD, right? We create the user, create group, and many more, right? So now, what if, I now have an environment? Maybe I was formerly in an on-premise environment, and now we are looking at moving to the cloud, or we are looking at co-managing both the on-premise and the cloud. That's where the hybrid comes in. And for me to have an hybrid, so if I create my users in my on-premise, right, do I need to start creating new users in the cloud if I want to move to the cloud? No, I don't need to do that. So that's when uh, Active Directory Connect, AD Connect, Usman mentioned something like AD Connect. AD Connect will now come in, right, for me to synchronize my existing users in my on-premise to cloud, right? For me to synchronize my existing groups from my on-premise to cloud, for me to synchronize my password policy from my on-premise to cloud, for me to synchronize my devices from on-premise to cloud so that I won't have duplicated users, right? So that's why we said you should set up the Windows server, right? Create the Windows server by using a VirtualBox, right? So once you set it up, you promote it to domain controller. Once you promote it to domain controller, you add your domain to it, right? So once you add your domain, create your users, then synchronize it to cloud. So that because even for the SSPR that you did, there are still some things that you need to do apart from just configuring it from the portal. If it's an environment that has an hybrid from, you need to synchronize their password policy from on-premise to cloud, right? So, but we would outline all these things down for you so that you will get it. And for the global access that Usman was explaining, right? Because if you want to set up an application, you need to install the connector of that global access on any server that is connected to your on-premise. So that's why we can't escape that server. Apart from the fact that we want you to synchronize some of your identities to the cloud, right? You still need that server for you to be able to set up the web application proxy. So that's why we cannot escape it. So we would outline the do you understand my whole explanation, Lawa and everyone? Hello?
Yes, yes, yes.
Oh, okay. So we would outline the tax, we would outline it out, and we'll drop it on the group chat. I'm sure it might be a little bit difficult, but then there are a lot of videos on YouTube. There are a lot of videos on YouTube, and as you are doing it, if you have any challenge, drop it on the group chat. I've not seen people dropping uh any challenge they are facing on the group chat. Once you have a challenge, drop it on the group chat. I would respond. Usman will respond. John there are a lot of people that can respond to any issue that you have, right? So Usman will help us outline the tax, right? We will outline it. So let's do that. Okay, John. Yeah, Usman will outline the tax. So we'll do it. Then I'm sure before our next call, which is on Sunday, I mean on Saturday, I expect that all of us should have everybody that has all of us that have our environment ready. I'm sure by Saturday we should be able to have our Active Directory. If you want to use the cloud virtual machine, fine. That's if you have access to the Azure, fine. And the easiest one is that VirtualBox. You can also do it. It's very easy. Usman has even shown us how to do it from the video. Just go to YouTube. You'll see several videos there. Yeah. So are we good? Are we all good?
Yes, we're
Hello?
good.
We are together. We are
Oh,
together.
okay. Okay, cool. Right, so I think we can actually end the session here. We can actually end the session here. We'll continue on Friday. I mean on Saturday. Usman, please don't forget to help outline the tax and drop it on the chat box. Usman, are you there? Usman. Okay. Sure.
Hello,
Maybe
boss.
Usman
That's
has.
noted.
Oh, okay, cool. No problem. So thank you everyone. See see you guys on Saturday. On Saturday, probably we might start by sharing our screen. I mean our video, so we can get to see everybody on the call, so that we can get familiar with ourselves. So thank you so much. Have a lovely night rest, everyone.
Thank you very much. Thank you so
Yeah.
much.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Yeah. So Emmanuel,
Bye.
you can reach out to me so that I'll help you set up your lab environment, yourself and the other new person.
All right, I'll do that. Thank you very
Yeah.
much.
All right. Let's stop the recording. So.